Me. Welcome to the Crown Point Community School Corporation Elementary English Language Arts Home Support video. The goals for this video include the following. First, we'll develop an understanding of what the science of reading is. We'll talk about our curriculum that we use here in Crown Point for English Language Arts in grades K to 5. And then we'll go into how you can support your child at home as they are learning how to read and become independent readers. And finally, we'll also talk about some supplemental materials that you can use as well with your student at home to help support them in their reading journey. My name's Amy McAllister. I am the Dyslexia and the Elementary Language Arts Specialist for elementary schools in Crown Point. And I have been in education for about 26 years. During that time, I've had a variety of roles, including teaching many grades ranging from 1st through 6th grade. I work with the Title I program in another district, and I've also been active with literacy coaching. The last 8 years I've been here in Crown Point, and most of those years I've been at Timothy Ball, where I taught 2nd and 3rd grade. But in my most recent position, I get to support teachers with the implementation of our English Language Arts curriculum, and I also work closely with teachers and administrators to ensure the success of all of our students. Learning to read is really like a science, believe it or not. There's a lot of pieces to the puzzle of learning how to read, and I'd like to take you through that in the next few slides here. So what is the science of reading? Well, if you think about it, it's kind of like a rope with many strands that are woven together. And we actually call this Scarborough's reading rope. And it's kind of like a metaphor with how a student is learning how to read. So this rope contains two main sections, as you can see, language comprehension and word recognition. And each of those is actually comprised of several smaller strands that are all very important to the entirety of the rope. And as a child gets older and becomes more proficient at reading, these little strands become interconnected and interdependent. And by the time a student learns how to read, the rope is woven together tightly, and that represents skilled reading. To read, a person actually needs to be able to decode words on the page. That's what the D stands for here. And they also need to be able to make sense of what they're reading, what those words mean. And we call that language comprehension. Now, the first task of decoding is made possible by decoding skills, and then the second task is by language comprehension ability. So students who cannot decode or sound out words on the page are never going to be able to achieve what we call reading comprehension. That's what the RC means. No matter how much the oral language that they are understanding, if they can't decode the words on the page, they'll never reach reading comprehension. Likewise, if a student can decode all the words on the page, but they can't make sense of what they're reading, they're not going to be able to understand what they're reading either, because they're lacking that knowledge, they're lacking that vocabulary, that background, which is essential to understanding a text. We refer to this as the simple view of reading. And this philosophy is associated with reading researchers Philip Goh and William Tunmer, and they express this combination of decoding skills and language comprehension ability and how they're essential for a child to become an independent reader. So students need both, like we said, decoding and language comprehension. However, it's really hard to learn both at the same time, especially for our younger readers. That initial cognitive load of sounding out the words on the page and decoding text takes a lot of effort, and that leaves little cognitive attention or energy left for mastering the knowledge that's on the page or that complex vocabulary. A lot of times, the two often interfere with each other, and this creates a challenge for our kids. We know that exposure to complex text, though, in a student's earliest years is very critical. However, this is the time when students have very limited decoding, and it makes that very challenging. In addition, numerous studies have shown that students' listening comprehension far outpaces their reading comprehension at this stage and beyond. In fact, these don't catch up with one another until a child is 13 years old. So a child is really able to understand when read to when they're younger, and that reading comprehension still is not mastered yet, or that reading rope, if you will, isn't completely woven together until they're age 13. So, knowledge and vocabulary can be taught more rapidly and efficiently through oral instruction in the early grades. Reading should really be like looking through a glass window, seeing the picture on the other side so clearly that you don't even realize the window is there. So, that's what we want reading to be like for our kids, to be effortless. But what happens a lot of time, especially if a child does not have a lot of knowledge or background or vocabulary in a certain area of study, what happens is this experience is more like this slide where they're looking through the window. It's kind of like trying to drive with a fogged up windshield. Everything is a little bit fuzzy and unclear on the other side. So if a child does not have that language, that background, their reading experience is going to be very difficult. To illustrate this, take a minute and read through this paragraph and try to find the main idea. Now, while the task wouldn't pose a challenge to a person who follows the game of cricket, the meaning of this text would be very hard to find and figure out to anyone that's unfamiliar with the game of cricket. All these words are related to the game, and if you don't have an understanding of that game, then it makes this passage very difficult to comprehend. And that's what happens to our students when they don't have knowledge to tap into a certain area of study. It's very difficult for them to make sense of what they're reading. So that leads me to tell you a little bit more about the program that we're using here in Crown Point for English Language Arts. CKLA is the acronym. You might have heard your kids talk about that at home, but it stands for Core Knowledge Language Arts. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. What Core Knowledge Language Arts does in grades K to 2 is they separate the skills strand, which is that decoding piece, and the knowledge strand, which is that language comprehension piece that we were talking about. So the skill strand is actually built upon a large research base, including the National Reading Panel, and the knowledge strand combines research on comprehension and vocabulary with a unique knowledge sequence. And this sequence defines what the students are taught in grades K to 5 and that order. So on this slide, you can see how the topics of study are related from grade to grade. So let's take a look at a literary topic first. So in kindergarten, a student is reading about stories. First grade, fables and stories. Second, fairy tales and tall tales. In third grade, they read a classic tale called The Wind in the Willows. Fourth grade is poetry. In fifth grade, they're working on a Shakespearean piece called A Midsummer Night's Dream. Now, all of these are interconnected and they actually build from grade to grade. So when a student is in grade 3, they may be hearing familiar vocabulary or familiar topics that they learned about in those previous strands in grades 2, 1, or even kindergarten. The same goes for nonfiction areas of study. So you can see here that this particular strand, taking care of the earth, begins in kindergarten. In first grade, the kids focus on a topic called the history of the earth, then cycles of nature, ecology, geology, and finally chemical matter. Again, all of these topics build on each other, so it's going to help your child really understand what they are reading. They'll have that background knowledge like we were just talking about, on the previous slide. And that's going to help them really tap into what they're reading and make sense of what they're reading. So when a student gets into grades 3 to 5, they don't receive their instruction in two separate pieces anymore. They don't have the decoding piece and they don't have the language comprehension piece. Instead, they're all in one place, and it ranges from either a 90-minute block to a 120-minute block, depending on your child's grade. And what happens here is students really move fluidly between reading, writing, speaking, and listening, and other language activities as well. So they're able to comprehend increasingly complex ideas and text, to make connections and inferences, and really engage in some extended discussions of the works that they're reading or what they've heard read aloud. Now, so there are still some read aloud opportunities in grades 3 to 5 to work on that oral comprehension piece, but not quite as much as in grades K to 2. Let's talk about how you can support your child at home with core knowledge, language arts, and what you can do as a parent or caregiver to promote reading. Now, you've probably seen your child bring home letters like these. We just call them take-home letters. They are written by CKLA, and they have a variety of information to help support your child at home with what they're learning. So that may include from the topic that your child is studying. It's going to give you some conversation starters that you can use to engage in discussion with what your child is learning at school. And you might be really taken aback by some of the things that they start talking about at the dinner table. It's quite impressive with some of the vocabulary terms that they're using. It also will tell you how you can promote vocabulary acquisition at home and spelling. And we'll get into that in a little bit as well. But a teacher told us that these are definitely refrigerator worthy. And I would definitely echo that this is something that you can hang on the fridge for the duration of that unit, just to help promote discussion and make meaningful conversation with your child at home. Another area where you can reinforce what's being done at school is right in your child's Chromebook. On their Chromebook, they have something called a student hub with CKLA, and they can access the textbooks and some videos, sound library videos, and vocabulary words that they've been working on at school. And so I'm going to show you where you can find that at. So first of all, when your child logs into their ELA Buzz course, they have what we call a landing page. And this page has these essential components on it, and these will never go away. So there's always a robot here that says CKLA, and this is how your child will access that hub I was just explaining. So I'm going to click on that robot. And then once there, I'm going to find the robot again. I'm going to go to the CKLA hub. Once I'm in the hub, I will see some tiles that my student can click on to access different features from CKLA. This is for grades 3, 4, and 5. This is what their hub looks like. There's a vocabulary app, so they can click here to go in and practice vocabulary words that they've been using at school. There's a library app where they can go in and read the text that they've been reading at school, so they don't have to bring home that textbook with them every night. They can access it right here. There's also a Spanish version of the textbook as well. In grades K1 and 2, it looks a little bit different. They have a theater tile, and this is where your student can go in and watch a video for each unit of study, and this will help build that background knowledge on that topic of study. There's also a sound library video, so your child can click here and go in and work on that decoding piece. So they can go in and click on sounds and work on sound spelling patterns that they've been learning at school. The video shows how to move your mouth to make the sounds a certain way. So that's another resource for you to be aware of. And also the library includes all of the decodable text that your child is reading in grades K1 and 2. Let's talk a little bit about spelling. Just so you're aware, it's a little bit different than maybe what your child has experienced in years past. So not every unit in CKLA has a spelling test. So your child may go for a whole unit, maybe 3 weeks without a spelling list, or they may have a list every other week, or they might have a list every week. It just depends on what grade they're in and what unit they're in as well. Now, the sound or the spelling words are words that the students have already learned the sound spelling pattern to. So it's not anything that they have not been explicitly taught. The last one or two words on the list are what we call either tricky words if the child is in grades K1 and 2, or challenge words if they're in grades 3, 4, and 5. Now, these words, we call them rule breakers. They break the rules. They don't follow the rules, and so that's why we call them tricky or challenge, and they have to be memorized. Methods for studying are always included in the take-home letter. So again, refer to that take-home letter for some ways that you can practice the words at home, and also what the words are that your students should be practicing. Spelling assessments aren't counted towards a grade. However, they do go in the grade book, but they don't count for or against a student's overall grade. Instead, what a teacher does is they use the results from that spelling assessment to either extend or remediate what your child is needing practice on. So it's a chance for a teacher to intervene before we get to that end of unit assessment, which does assess a student on spelling, and that will be counted towards their grade. For vocabulary, it's really all about exposure, and things are repeated often in CKLA in a meaningful way. So a primary goal of the CKLA program is to expose students to really rich domain-specific vocabulary and general academic vocabulary words. The text and associated instructional materials within each unit have been crafted to provide repeated exposure to these selected vocabulary words. Each domain is based and has about a span of 3 weeks to it. So this really allows for domain immersion that's needed to acquire new vocabulary. We're not jumping from topic to topic. We are really going deep into a topic. Through repeated exposure, students will what we call implicitly gain a greater understanding of many different words. So we're not taking a list home, memorizing it, and having a quiz over it on Friday. We're really trying to make the vocabulary meaningful. And it's a lot like when a child is learning the language when they're a toddler. It's repeated opportunities of hearing that word used in context. That's what promotes mastery of a vocabulary word. Again, ideas for how you can support your child at home with vocabulary can be found in those take-home letters. Like I said, we want to use the words in context instead of just memorizing a definition, and that will be much more meaningful for your child. There aren't weekly vocabulary quizzes for CKLA. Again, your child will be assessed at the end of the unit on those vocabulary words. Let's talk about how else we can support our kids at home with reading and some of the resources we also have with English language arts. So within the Buzz course, you are going to see a folder down here. I'm going to scroll down. That's called ELA Home Support. And within that folder, there's many, many different things for you to access, including all of the unit letters that go with CKLA for your child's grade. We have the CKLA Caregiver Hub for some great ideas, again, on how you can support your kids at home and what CKLA is all about. It tells you here how your child can log in to CKLA. And we also have something called RAS Kids, Tumble Books, and how you can support your English learners at home. So this bottom one, supporting young English learners at home, if you click on this, I just want to take you in there real quick before we jump into Raz Kids and Tumble Books. But this resource here has all kinds of things that you can download, all kinds of resources you can download to help promote that language comprehension piece at home with your child. So it gives you some questions that you can ask about stories that you read together. If you are maybe making a meal with your child, you can download this resource here, and it gives you some questions and ideas for how you can develop language with them. If you go to the grocery store with your child, here's some things that you can do with your child to promote that language development. So some really great resources here for you, and they're also available in a variety of languages. All right, let's talk about Raz Kids for just a second. So Raz Kids, this is how you can access how your child is doing at home. On Raz Kids, your child can also access Raz Kids up here at the top of their landing page. It's called Kids A to Z. So it's called both. You may hear them talk about Raz Kids, Kids A to Z. It's the same thing. And what's special about Kids A to Z is that students can listen and read to books. And there are more than 3,000 leveled books and readers available to your child. And this can be done at school. This could be done at home any time of the day. There is no limited access to when a child can read the books 24/7. Students will log in right here through this Kids A to Z landing page. And if you would like access to how your child is doing, you can follow the directions that are listed down here in the ELA Home Support folder, and it will take you through the steps for you to gain access to your child's progress in Raz Kids. You can also reach out to your student's teacher if you want some more information about how you can access Raz Kids at home with your child and see how they're doing on your end. The other resource I want to talk about is Tumble Books. Now, this is actually something that Crown Point Library has partnered with our school corporation on. So all of your kids have access to this wonderful resource. And it's basically a curated database of children's ebooks, which all Crown Point students have a subscription to in conjunction with the Crown Point Public Library. So what's available here? Well, let me just tell you, there's a plethora of things available. There's storybooks, there's chapter books, there's read-alongs, there's graphic novels, and those are just a few kinds of ebooks that are available to your child. Books can also be searched to match your child's Lexile level. Now, a Lexile measure is basically, it describes your student's reading ability and allows you to compare that ability with the difficulty of books and other texts. Lexile measures are always a number followed by a capital L. You can also find your child's Lexile level on the Math Growth Student Progress Report that was sent home with your student in September. At the bottom, underneath the language arts reading portion, you can find their Lexile range, as you see right here. The student's is 780 to 930. So any book within that range would be appropriate for him or her to read. And if you don't have access to this report anymore, you can always contact your child's teacher, and they will be able to tell you what your child's Lexile level is as well. So this video that was in that Caregiver Hub will tell you how you can manipulate Tumble Books at home and how you can search books. So that's for you, for your reference. But also I want to show you how your student can get into Tumble Books. If, again, it's on the landing page, so they would just click right here. And then here's all the ebooks. I mean, there's thousands and thousands and thousands. If you want to narrow that search down, you just click on Tumble Search here. You can search by a variety of ways. I was telling you that Lexile might be something worth, a worthwhile way to search for a book. So if you know that your child's Lexile is 650, then you would select this range, click go, and then right at your fingertips, there are all kinds of books to read that are in that range. A lot of picture books, storybooks, ebooks. You can read online. Sometimes there's a quiz that goes with it, not every time, but it's here at your fingertips. So I wanted to make you aware of that as well. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video on how you can support your child at home with English language arts.